Joe is a 4-year, 7-month-old male who is displaying deficits in social interaction and social communication. During the evaluation, the parent reported the following information. Caregivers must frequently infer Joe's intent. Joe exhibits a lack of eye contact and orients his body away from his communication partners. Joe is able to mimic a few limited sounds. Joe has a very limited use of gestures used exclusively in routines as reported by Chesterfield Pediatrics. For example, he sticks his fingers in his mouth when he's sleepy or hungry, but he does not do so with intent to share a communicative message. During observation, Joe took a toy from an adult without connecting in play or interaction, manipulating select objects using solitary play only. He also did not demonstrate any turn-taking skills or use any gestures during the evaluation. Furthermore, Joe did not use eye contact at the time of the evaluation, but has since improved as reported in his present level of academic achievement and functional performance from April 21st, 2010.
Ultimately, the clinician would like Joe to increase his intentional social skills through building social reciprocity and developing joint attention skills that will enable him to effectively interact with peers and adults in his life. The long-term goal of Joe's treatment plan states, Joe will shift his gaze between an object and communicative partner in response to requests for joint attention within 10 seconds of presentation of the bid and with no more than one clinician prompt or cue in 80% of measured opportunities. Bids for joint attention can include pointing to an object, eye gazing at an object, and or eye gazing in the direction of a noise made by a toy. For purposes of this treatment plan, verbal attention directing tactics count as prompts. Joe's treatment plan is broken down into 5 short-term goals that will be met over a year. 1A states Joe will make a personal interaction by building a sequence of turns of intentional communication during a 1-minute period, for example, the giggle game. 1B states Joe will make a personal interaction by building a sequence of turns of intentional communication during a 3-minute period, example, the giggle game. The first 2 build social reciprocity as a foundational skill for the joint attention responses. 1C states Joe will shift his gaze to an object as prompted by a communicative partner's request for joint attention within 10 seconds of presentation of the bid and no more than 2 prompts or cues in 70% of measured opportunities. 1D states Joe will shift his gaze to an object as prompted by a communicative partner's request for joint attention within 5 seconds of presentation of the bid and no more than 1 prompt or cue in 80% of measured opportunities. 1E states Joe will shift his gaze between an object and communicative partner in response to requests for joint attention within 10 seconds of presentation of the bid and no more than 2 clinician prompts or cues in 70% of measured opportunities. With each of the last 3 goals, we work from Joe responding to a bid for joint attention by shifting his gaze to an object and eventually being able to shift his gaze back to the communicative partner. The objective for the role-play session states, Joe will shift his gaze to an object as prompted by a communicative partner's request for joint attention within 15 seconds of presentation of the bid and no more than 3 prompts or cues in 60% of measured opportunities.
The primary goal of this treatment is to establish joint attention and to increase the frequency of spontaneous initiations of joint attention, hereby improving later language skills. Joint attention is a core deficit of autism, and it is a term used to refer to a specific set of gestures used in sharing. A child may initiate joint attention by using a coordinated joint look, showing, giving to share, or pointing. A child may respond to joint attention by following a point or following a gaze. The target of the intervention is a response to and spontaneous initiation of joint attention. Clinicians use a naturalistic, structured play setting to create opportunities for a child to initiate joint attention and record data for the frequency and prompting level given to elicit the joint attention. Clinicians teach caregivers strategies for practicing joint attention with the child and regularly evaluate data for measuring progress. For the purposes of Joe's therapy, the clinician will focus on promoting a response prior to targeting initiations, Responses will be easier to elicit because an initiation will require higher level skills, including metacognition and metalinguistics, and a response is more natural and prompted. Initiations also require Joe to desire interaction with others, while he currently prefers solitary play. In 2006, Casari and colleagues conducted a study with 58 children who had autism that focused on initiations of joint attention in young children ages 3 to 5. Each child was randomly assigned to either the Joint Attention Skills Training, which I will later refer to as JA, the Symbolic Play Skills Training, SP, or a control condition modeled from applied behavior analysis. All participants received 6 hours of therapy 5 days a week within their early intervention program. The JA and SP conditions received individual therapy 5 times a week for 30 minutes for 5 to 6 weeks. Ultimately, all children in the study received the same number of hours of ABA, speech, and other therapies or interventions. The JA group targeted skills following a structured protocol, including priming, generalization to floor play, strict criteria for mastery of a skill, and execution within a developmental framework. The SP group served as a comparison treatment model and followed a developmental model of play. After intervention, the participants completed exit assessments, a 6-month follow-up, and a 12-month follow-up with independent examiners. Results showed that the JA group displayed more responding to joint attention in both structured and generalized assessment as compared to the other groups. Additionally, researchers found that children with the greatest delays in language benefited most from an intervention specifically targeting joint attention.
Joint attention is a critical milestone for language development as it marks the beginning of social cognitive development that is necessary for language acquisition. Development of joint attention thus correlates with later verbal outcomes. The theory behind joint attention is derived from the observation that certain early interaction patterns seen in typical development are often missing or are later developing in children with autism. Individuals with autism have marked differences in communication skills, and many of the skills involve joint attention. Children with autism have impaired eye gaze, lack of spontaneous sharing of enjoyment, interests, or achievements, and weak integration of social, emotional, and communicative behaviors. By utilizing joint attention skills in intervention, there may be a prevention of negative outcomes associated with poor communication abilities for children with autism, which is a diagnostic criterion. Before an individual is able to shift gaze between a communicative partner and an object, it is imperative that they have gained social reciprocity skills in order to attend to the back and forth shifting of an interaction. Susan Aud Saunders, 2003, suggests that a child who lacks the ability to attend to a reciprocal interaction may also lack an ability to use joint attention, which is a core communication skill. Ultimately, developing social reciprocity and joint attention will help him to communicate more effectively with peers and adults.
We are in the 4th month of intervention on our second 45-minute session. Joe has not met the current short-term goal, but is responding to his name being called by looking in the direction of the clinician and will engage with the clinician during the giggle game. Joe will also glance at the clinician's hand when she is pointing, but does not follow the point. Dad reports that Joe currently enjoys playing with balls and dinosaurs rather than past preferences of toy cars and toy airplanes. Dad also reports that Joe is currently eating more variety of foods, including chicken and plain salad. In preparation for the current session, the clinician has placed a desired object, a dinosaur, on a shelf out of Joe's reach. The dad is in the session and will be involved in joint attention intervention. The clinician will coach the dad in implementing the joint attention intervention strategy to promote Joe's ability to follow a point for joint attention purposes. The clinician will collect the data through observation of Joe during the session. Data will be collected every time Joe responds or fails to respond to requests for joint attention by following a partner's bids for joint attention, whether the bid is initiated by the clinician or the caregiver. When Joe responds within 10 seconds and within 2 prompts or cues, a plus is indicated on the data collection form. When he does not respond or uses more than 10 seconds or 2 prompts or cues, a minus will be indicated on the data collection form. Furthermore, for every opportunity, the number of prompts will be noted in the column titled Number of Prompts. The bids included in this session will be pointing to an object, using eye gaze at an object, and or using eye gaze in the direction of noise made by a toy. The bid used for each trial should be noted in the bid used column, and the initiating partner should be indicated.
Man, Joe is really enjoying that giggle game that we've been working on.
I can tell.
He's really getting that back and forth interaction, waiting for me when I initiate, or responding by looking at me, waiting for me to do it to him. And that's really great that he's building on that interaction. Have you been working on it at home?
Mm-hmm. But I just want to know again, what's the importance?
The importance of building that back and forth interaction helps us get ready for the next step in working on conversation skills. Because, as a conversation, it's a back and forth thing. So Joe doesn't have any sort of skills up to this point for a back and forth kind of reciprocal interaction. So doing that giggle game kind of helps him build that being able to respond or wait and knowing that something else is coming from a partner. And so now that we have that foundation, we can go ahead and start with that joint attention intervention that I talked about a while back. And what that'll look like is basically joint attention, involves a set of gestures or actions that involve sharing an experience. And he can either initiate something to share an experience with you or respond to something that you have pointed out in order to share an experience with you. So a response could include, I made this little handout for you so you can take it home and just read over it. But a response to some sort of bid for joint attention would be following a point, for example. So if you pointed at something on the wall that was super interesting and you wanted to share in that experience with him, a response would be if he followed your point to that object. Following a gaze would just be if you said look and you didn't point, but you looked at something and he recognized what you were looking at and shared in that and responded by looking at that same object. Responses are going to be much easier to get, so that's going to be the first thing we work on. And then eventually we want him to be able to initiate. So he has to have a desire to want to share something with you and know that there's a back and forth sort of thing that goes with it. Initiations can include a coordinated joint look, so him looking at something to get your interest in it and sharing it with you. Him showing you something that he wants to show you what he has, that he's very interested in. So his ball, saying, look, Daddy, look what I have, a ball. And getting you to share in the excitement of that object. And then giving to share, so if he wanted you to play with him, so say there's a ball, him giving you the ball and waiting on you to respond to his bid for joint attention. And of course pointing, which he hasn't really gotten that point down. So while we're working on him being able to respond to your bids for joint attention, I'm going to also use my hand to kind of shape a point. So eventually, hopefully, he can learn that gesture. So you're going to see that today as we're working with that joint attention skills. So you can go ahead and put that.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions about that? I know that was a lot of information at one time.
So why are these specific gestures important?
These, first the initiations. These are the specific things that we all do to try to get somebody else interested in what we want or to start a reciprocal interaction. So people either point or they say something, hey, look, or they give. Those are the sorts of things that we all do to try to get somebody else interested in what we do. But if he doesn't have those skills, then he doesn't build or start interactions with other people, thus isolating himself a little bit. So we want to kind of build those skills so that when he goes into school shortly, he'll be able to, initiate interactions with other people. And responding, of course, that's important because if he can initiate it and someone responds, he can't respond back if he doesn't have those skills. So there wouldn't be any sort of back and forth. And, once he gets down how to initiate an interaction and respond to an interaction, we can work on being able to have conversations and actually lay down topics and talking and things like that. So these are just very foundational skills for having social communication interaction. Does that make more sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for this.
You're welcome. So, as I've said this entire process, I want you to feel comfortable in the things that we're doing with Joe so that you can take it home and do it, because that's really important for you to have a good relationship with him and to feel confident in your yourself being able to help him and have those interactions. So we're going to start the joint attention intervention, and we're just going to be working on responses. And part of that, I'm going to be helping shape that point, as I mentioned before. So in order to do that, we need to get next to Joe. So with you sitting on one side and me sitting on the other, what we'll be doing is you'll be guiding everything. I'll kind of coach you in what you need to say, and then I'll be helping with the point and trying to get him to look. So we've put his dinosaur. You said that was his new favorite interest.
Yeah, he can't get enough of that dinosaur.
Awesome. So hopefully he'll be used to me trying to take things away as I've done in therapy. So once I take the ball away, hopefully it won't be too much for him to handle. But we have put the dinosaur up there so that that can be our target for trying to get him to look at something interesting, because we know it's something he is interested in. So,
and do I need 3 people at home? Do I need to find someone else?
No. The way I'm going to coach you today, you'll be able to take that home and do it yourself. So that's why I'm going to tell you kind of what to say, and then also you'll see how I'm shaping that point, and you can kind of take that home and do that as well. So basically we're going to start by you just saying, look, Joe, a dinosaur, and pointing to it and trying to really get his attention to that object. So you have to be excited and show that it's something really interesting. And try to, shift your gaze back and forth between him and the dinosaur to create this kind of triangle of interaction with an object in Joe. And then, he may not respond right away or look at the dinosaur, because, that's one of the reasons we're trying to do this today and kind of build those skills for him. So then what we'll have to do is what's called prompting, where it's just, we'll tell him, look, or I'll use my hand to kind of guide his hand up to look at an object, and vice versa, you'll do the same thing. So, so let's get started. Do you have any questions about how that process is going to work before we begin?
So when I'm at home and there are toys everywhere, how do I pick which toys? Do I leave them? Do I take, if he was playing with this ball, do I take it away?
Good question. So, we know that lots of different toys can be pretty distracting, so that's why when we come in here, we kind of have to put away most things and hide them, and just keep out the things we know are going to get his interest the most. So today we have the ball and the dinosaurs. So kind of at home, if there's a ton of toys out, he's not playing with them, those are probably going to be your easiest bet to put away first without causing too much of a disruption for him. And you kind of want to just take Joe's lead most of the time. So if he is, interested in something, you want to go by what he is interested in. So if he's interested in that ball, we can put that ball up there and, get that to be what we are trying to get his attention for. So we'll see if we can get him interested in that dinosaur today, and if not, since he's been really interested in this ball, we could put that up there. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, since he's not playing with it, we're going to say bye-bye, ball. And we're going to see if we can get him interested in that dinosaur, all right? So let's begin. So you'll just go ahead and start by saying, look, Joe, a dinosaur.
Look, Joe, a dinosaur.
Good job shifting your gaze. This time, kind of maybe just tap him a little bit. Joe, look, to try to get his attention, because he seems to be interested in the patterns on the floor and things like that. So maybe that'll help get his attention a little bit. And I'll give him a couple seconds, and if he isn't responding, we'll start using some prompting to try to get that.
Joe, look, a dinosaur.
So I'll use hand over hand. Look, Joe, a dinosaur. Look, Joe, what's Daddy pointing to?
Look, Joe, a dinosaur.
There we go. You get the dinosaur. So you saw how, he wasn't really getting that you were pointing at an object for him to interact with. But when we did some prompting, so, I helped him shape his point to see if he could look in that direction when I made his hand do it. Then I said, look, what's Daddy looking at? And pointed to your hand, so he noticed that your hand was doing something. And then that final prompt that you gave was excellent, because as soon as you said, look, Joe, a dinosaur, and he was already looking at your hand, he kind of got that he needed to look at something else. So it may take, a couple prompts the first couple times that we're doing this intervention, and maybe for a couple weeks. It just depends on how responsive he is. But what we'll do is we'll just keep giving those prompts, give him plenty of time to respond, and the hope is that he'll eventually get quicker at responding with less prompting, and he'll be able to just kind of get that the next time you want to say, look, a dinosaur, and he immediately will just, interact with you. So So you can do this at home. You can, when you see that he's interested in something, if he puts down a toy for a second, pick that toy up, put it on a shelf, and then try to get his attention and show him where it is now. And you can also do it yourself with trying to get him to point. Do you want to try that really quickly?
Okay.
Okay, so let's try it this time with you pointing, and then when Joe doesn't look, you go ahead and turn and get his hand shaped into a point, and try to just remember to prompt him and look. And I'll just sit back and let you kind of do it this time, okay?
Joe, look, a dinosaur. Look, Joe, a dinosaur. I'm looking at a dinosaur. Nice looking.
Excellent. That was a really great job shifting your gaze back and forth, giving him plenty of good prompting. And you can wait just a little bit longer next time if you're comfortable with that. Sometimes it might just take him a minute. I saw he kind of shifted his gaze a little bit from your hand to the toy and back, so just wait that out so that you can really give him plenty of time to do that on his own. But yeah, that was a really great job.
I look forward to doing this at home.